So today we've got an exciting, story from Louise. But before we get started, I'll share some of what C2 does and how we fit into Louise's and IAG's story. So the journey they've been on to get to Universal Agentic Orchestration and why they found BPM not to be enough isn't just another story about process improvement. It's about what happens when you, as an enterprise, decide to manage intelligence and not just automation. So for years, BPM was, our blueprint for control. It brought order, visibility, and compliance to all of these complex processes that we run as businesses. But BPM was built for a world where change was predictable, where logic was fixed, and humans made every decision and did most of the work. For better or worse, that world is gone. And as much as it feels like we've come a long way, we're still really in the infancy of automation. The rate of change is just increasing, if not day by day, certainly by quarter by quarter. And we're now, in a world where automation is everywhere. AI is no longer a simple model you can deploy. It's becoming an ecosystem of agents that reason, act, and adapt. And in this is sort of a counterintuitive truth that's worth pointing out, I think, because it encapsulates why BPM is no longer sufficient. So we've spent decades teaching managers to delegate and let go, so to not micromanage people. But when it comes to technology, the opposite is true. The more precisely you manage it, the more intelligently it behaves. And orchestration, is what connects these dots between RPA, API, AI, agentic system, and human work, and turning all of these disconnected tools and people into one coordinated intelligent system. Fortunately, C2 is that orchestrator. It makes technologies cooperate to deliver outcomes. We have a pretty simple approach. It's simple, measurable, and fast, and it's taking our customers from proof to transformation in 90 days, is how we label it. So in the first 30 days, we focus on your RPA estate. So applying item level dynamic orchestration to increase your bot capacity by 50% or more. And you'll also start seeing workflow smarter and faster. The next 30 days are all about operational efficiency. So we automate the monitoring, the fixing, and the escalation of incidents, cutting the manual support effort by as much as 75%, and consistently delivering 95% or higher SLA adherence. So work always gets done on time. And in doing so, we increase the value of and building trust in the automations you have. And then we get to the final 30 days, which is more what we're talking about today. But they build on those first 60 days. And in the final 30 days, we expand the scope. We connect multiple technologies, agents, and humans into the same orchestrated end-to-end processes. And that's when orchestration stops being just a cost saver and it becomes a scale and AI enabler, powering true end-to-end processing with the same intelligence and control that we proved in the first 60 days. So this is the journey that Louise and IAG's embarked on. So they had a really mature BPM foundation and a very strong automation experience. But as their ambition grew, and especially around AI, they faced the same challenge that many enterprises are now confronting. And I'm sure based on your answers, that's a whole truth for all of you as well. And that's how do you move from sort of isolated automation success to an enterprise-wide model that's safe, efficient, and scalable with control? So how do you go from POC to something that works as an enterprise grade, always delivers when it's supposed to? And that's what led IAG, I should say, to Universal Agentic Orchestration, to C2, is to build that control layer for their multi-technology and agentic future. Their focus right now, and what I think is sort of so forward thinking, centers around three outcomes every enterprise will soon have to master, I think. So the first one is to optimize the value of their current infrastructure and licenses. When orchestration prioritizes work dynamically, you realize most of your software isn't underperforming, it's just underutilized. It can do a lot more. So it's a way to grow faster or to save on what you're paying for. So the second one is to adopt AI and agentic systems with confidence. So they're building a foundation where these technologies can operate safely with governance, context, and control, but they decided to do it from day one. Not everyone does. Very often you'll see organizations suffer the pain before they realize that they need a solution for orchestration. And then third, they want to show the business and the executives the value of the automation that automation is creating. And that's not just through dashboards, it's through real outcomes that the business can truly trust. So Lewis, I've shared some of the theory. We've had some feedback, and I'm sure everyone's keen to hear from you and how you and the IAG team is turning this theory into practice. So interested to hear your thinking around the future, your progress, and some of your ambitions. So I'll hand it over to you, Luis.
Absolutely, Eric. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you, and looking forward to share our story, and then hopefully that will be helpful as part of your own journey. So the title of the next part of the discussion is how do we increase productivity and capacity? How do we make the group more competitive by using intelligent automation? And intelligent automation encompasses pretty much everything, good old RPA, which still has a big place for us, but also the new technologies, the new AI capabilities. So how do we make sense of all of that, but always with a focus on value? I joke always with my colleagues, but it's not a joke, it's quite serious. What determines if I get a bonus every year is not how many automations we have implemented, is not whether we deploy 300 agents and we have 100 more than Lufthansa. Is not definitely not that, but it's actually how much value we have added to our shareholders. That's what the metric is. Very, very simple, but very difficult to achieve. But that sort of galvanizes everybody's effort into that objectives. Let's move on to the next slide, if that's okay, Eric. Thank you. So before joining IAG, I spent a career as an automation consultant, leading the European practice for Cognizant for a few years, enjoying the work. It was the right place at the right time with RPA, and having, my finger in the pulse, as I used to say, because I knew, very large European accounts, what they were doing with automation, etc. When I joined IAG, the first thing that surprised me is that the level of automation that had been achieved is very different to a bank or an insurance company, where I had customers before with 600 automations, 1,000 automations. I realized that the airline industry as a whole, not IAG, but the airline industry as a whole, is not an early adopter of these things. There was quite a lot of work, and that's what really got me excited, because the potential is massive. Automation really started by one of the airlines in the group, British Airways. They have a very talented team that they started testing the technologies as part of the pandemic. As you can imagine, airlines is a business that was incredibly impacted in the pandemic, ground to a halt, could be said. And this team started developing automations on their own. They took it upon themselves to start developing automations to be able to deal with the fact that people couldn't get to places. You can't get to the office anymore. You can't get to the airport anymore and do your job. So the automations were doing quite a lot of mission critical services that allow people to fly. So that team really, with heroic efforts, managed to keep the business afloat through the use of automation. So it's a fantastic story to share, and we have that team still doing a lot of automation for BA. And the story goes that they were effectively running some of those automations in laptops because IT were of the opinion that, hey, what is this shadow IT happening here? Oh, you're not getting a server, you're not getting access to anything. So they end up running some of those automations in their laptops and effectively setting their alarm off so that they would wake up every few hours and make sure that the automation was still running, because the revenue, the lifeline of the business, was depending on those automations. So very, very tough way to get started, but definitely highlighting the value of automation to the group. And if we can get to the next slide, effectively, that was the start of the journey back in 21, 22. Very much finding a place for automation, not just in British Airways, but across the different opcos. They were testing the waters a little bit. And it was in 2023 where the potential was realized to say, hey, this is a thing, this is important, this can add a lot of value. And can we go beyond RPA? In 2024 is when we established the group CEO. So effectively working very, very closely in partnership with the different operating companies, and trying to support them centrally with capabilities, and support in any way we can. And C2 made an appearance. This is when we realized, oh, hang on a second, we need to make better use of our automations. We need to make sure we're sweating our assets a little bit better when it comes to automation licensing and when it comes to SLA management and tracking. And that's how we started engaging with Eric and the team here. But then it got very serious. The volume of automations that were being delivered increased quite significantly. And what we call the ARB, which is the metric that we track for automations, is ARB, which stands for annual recurring benefit. So it's a very simple metric. Effectively, you deploy an automation, you measure the value it brings, whether it's cost savings, new revenue, cost avoidance, whatever the measure of value is, and you analyze it. And you analyze it, why? Because you want to make sure that you're being fair to that automation. And if it goes live in December, you don't say, oh, but that automation only delivers so much value. And we always go for the annualized potential, if that makes sense. But that demand started exploding. It just growing exponentially in terms of the appetite for this, because the credibility had been established and there was a lot of demand coming our way. But this is the interesting thing. It was mainly opportunistic. And what I mean by that is that we could be sitting on our pedestal and the demand was coming our way. It was so vast that it was just not a week would go by without a request from any business area to help him with automation. So that's what I mean. It was reactive. It was opportunistic. And just by dealing with that demand, we were being incredibly successful because it was so much. However, that had a couple of significant limitations for us. And many of you in the call, I can only imagine that you're automation practitioners or you are aware of automation. So one of the first challenges that we came across with this is, well, usually when the business approaches you, they have a very specific idea of what they need automated and a very narrow idea of what needs to be automated. So they will come to you and say, can you help me automate this task, please? And we would try our best to say, yeah, of course we can help, but what happens before that and what happens after that? Can we look at your entire process? And how does this business process connects to the other processes? Are we gonna increase the throughput of this process only to find out that the process downstream is going to struggle because you've opened the floodgates? How do we manage that? And it was always that struggle. You want to help, you want to automate whatever the internal customer is asking you to automate. But at the same time, we felt that obligation to say, you could do a lot better if you look at this holistic as a end-to-end process, or indeed as a business area, as an entire domain, if you want to call it that. So the focus in 2025 has been very much that, very much how do we switch to automating entire domains? How can we start the conversation proactively as opposed to reactively, and figure out a way to look at the quantum of work that the business unit is doing, and then start automating based on what we think is going to give us the biggest bang for the buck. Is it going to drive competitiveness? Is it going to reduce cost? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And it's becoming a lot more strategic, going after domains, not the tasks. We're focusing very strongly, and some of you may be doing the same around BPO. Again, we are a group that has that a significant amount of work is happening in BPO contracts, and those, as you well know, they are very fertile ground for automation. So we're focusing on those. How do we automate and increase throughput and capacity and remove handoffs by going after that? The ratio of we call it silicon versus human toil. How, within a business area, how much of the work is being done by digital colleagues, and we're being generic on purpose, because it doesn't matter if it's a bot, if it's an agent, what is it? It doesn't really matter, but how much of that work is happening with digital colleagues compared to human colleagues, because that gives us an idea of, again, what that balance is. But we're also trying to move the needle from RPA to a full stack automation. Again, Eric mentioned this, different tools can do a different job, and they for automation practitioners, this is fantastic, because the level of automation we can achieve is much higher than it has ever been, because now you can automate cognitive activities. Now you can automate, very complex tasks that were impossible before for RPA, but now, the world has changed. But that brings us a challenge, and that is, how can you orchestrate all of these capabilities? Because at the end of the day, you still have a business process that needs to be stitched together, and you know that you have an SLA that from A to B, and in between, you now need to orchestrate all these different things. There's an agent doing something. There is, and I'm sure you're getting the same in your businesses. What about the AI capabilities in the core platforms that you have? The SAPs, the Workdays, the ServiceNows, the Salesforce. We have all of that, and it would be foolish to ignore those capabilities and just say, nah, you know what? We're not going to switch those on because we're going to do our own thing outside. So this is where C2 can add a lot of value for us, and it's adding a lot of value for us because it doesn't matter. It allows you to orchestrate a business process and call all these disparate and independent technologies and stitch them together into a single process, and help us with things like, well, I call this AI capability in ServiceNow for step 7 of the process, but it hasn't responded. What's going to happen? We're going to miss the SLA in this process. So C2 is helping us keeping track of those SLAs, dealing with retries, dealing with escalation paths. You still need to control all of that if you want to get to the benefits. So it's not about switching on the AI capabilities and the automation. It's about making sure that you're able to orchestrate all of those together. And that's been very much the focus on not just 2025, but going into 26. We're only going to get a lot more of this coming on, where it's a hybrid, a mixed bags of technologies, but the ability to orchestrate them and giving us that huge advantage to use the best tool for the job. You're not limited to just the one tool. You're not limited to just the one suite of technologies. You can just use whatever the best of the technology is to achieve that maximum automation. Let's move on, Eric, to the next slide, please, if that's okay. You're on mute, Eric, I think.
Yeah. Sorry. I just wonder if I can ask you two.
Oh, please, of course. Yeah.
One quick and one maybe longer question. So you're moving from RPA to full stack. is that a sort of a pull from the business to include new technologies? Is it a push from management? You know, everyone's talking about agents. What are you doing with agents, Louise? Or is it I know you're very forward leaning and you want to use the best tools, or is it from, the core expertise that wants to bring this in?
It's a very good question, and I would say all of the above as a short answer. We're not immune to pressure. I had my boss's boss, who's a board member in IAG. I bumped into him as I was getting into the office, and he said to me, the first thing he said to me, I just read that Lufthansa deploy 100 agents. Why don't we have 100 agents? And I'm like, "Whoa, what are they going to do?" And but that doesn't matter. That matters to them. Why, we are competing. We need to be able to tell these things. So we're not immune to that pressure, and we don't believe that even though the RPA technology that we use has the ability to do agentic, we shouldn't just automatically decide that and gravitate to that. There may be other technologies that are much better at agentic. So we don't want to close the door to those technologies. But there's a third reason, Eric, not just the using the best tool for the job. There is a third reason. We do have very capable SAP teams in the business and very capable Workday and ServiceNow teams in the business that are desperate to add more value by switching on the AI capabilities in those products. And so far, the answer has been no, because, well, it's going to be a lot of cost and you're not solving any problems, because rarely a business process lives entirely in one of those platforms. Usually, you have a little bit of ServiceNow, a little bit of SAP, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's also pushing us to do that, because I can get to that objective of delivering value to shareholders a lot quicker if I'm able to bring those teams into the picture and say, hey, let's automate this process by stitching together all these technologies. So I'm hoping that makes sense, Eric.
Yeah, no, that makes very much sense, and it sort of aligns with what lots of our customers are saying. Although not everyone has, a team as advanced as yours. The other question is, everyone wants to move to agentic or to power automate and so on. So there's a rip and replace approach,
Mhm.
or you say, we're going to use all these new technologies to enrich what we have to be able to automate more with the technologies that we have and know works, and then migrate, at the opportune moment. Have you chosen a strategy, or?
You mean in terms of why we want to do agentic? Is that what
Yeah,
you're?
or do you sort of see, we're gonna put agentic into, we're gonna replace what we do with RPA or APIs and so on with agentic now, or is it more we're gonna enrich what we have so we can automate more with the technologies we have?
Yeah, I get it. It's the latter. We're not going to replace RPA. In fact, we're quite early in our RPA journey. There's a lot of work that can be still automated in the group with RPA. So we're not dismissing that at all. We want to accelerate. What agentic does for us is you now have the ability to automate stuff that we couldn't do before. But we come at it with our eyes open, and we don't say to the business, everything must be an agent now. And we do have the pressure, as I said, my boss's boss telling me, why don't we have 100 agents? So we try our best to resist that temptation, engage the business and understand the business problem they're trying to solve, and then use that combination of technologies. And sometimes, you know what? The boring answer is this is an RPA use case. But what we're finding in many cases is like, whoa, hang on a second. Yes, there is a couple of bots that we can deploy, but if we deploy an agent here, that's going to help us achieve a higher degree of automation. So from that perspective, very much accelerating and expanding on the agents. But we're not just focused on doing agents, because then I wouldn't be true to my objective of delivering value to the business, right? I'm still yet to be convinced that the agents will have the same level of ROI as the good old RPA. So hopefully they will, and better. But for now, let's just expand the technology basket that we have.
I think that makes Perfect sense. Maybe you should change the name from bots to agents, and you can tell your boss that you've got lots of agents.
We have hundreds of them already. Yes, exactly, exactly. And that's probably something you're seeing with your markets as well, and everybody in the call. There's a lot of confusion right now. There's so much noise on agents that I feel there's quite a lot of confusion on what people define as an agent. And they approach you quite often. They approach you and say, "Hey, can you develop this agent for us?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, what is it going to do?" Well, it's going to read the data from this spreadsheet and it's going to punch that data into SAP. And you're like, that sounds to me like a deterministic robotic process, isn't it? So there's a lot of confusion on that, and I was joking with Eric before the call. I kind of gave up try to have that debate with the business. We can help you. Don't worry about the tech. We'll help you automate, and we'll deal with whether it's an agent or not. But let me switch to a couple of examples that I wanted to share with you that they're probably interesting and representative of what we're trying to achieve. SOSR, you're probably asking yourself, what the heck is that? It stands for selling outside of system range, and it's a holiday automation, holiday related automation for our BA holidays business. They're not an airline. But they operate very much in the holiday packaged experience space. They had a challenge where they couldn't sell holidays beyond a year in advance because of system limitations. As many of you in the call, we have lots of legacy systems, very, very old systems that are difficult to integrate to, difficult to change, difficult to maintain. So they were limited by that. And what they discovered is that there was a lot of demand of people planning their holidays, more than a year in advance. So that money was being left on the table because we just couldn't capture it. So we used automation to effectively understand that intention from the customer as they engage with the website and be able to book those holidays even outside of the limitations of the system. We deal with that in the background, but allow them to book the holiday. Really, really important. Capture that revenue. So really interesting use case, and it uses robotics. It uses AI, understanding of customer intent and things like that. So it was a really interesting for us, but incredibly, incredibly profitable for us in terms of the ROI. The development cost compared to the revenue it brings, it pales. So it's fantastic case study. The next one, passenger claims. This is an automation that is completely agentic in nature, and it helps understand whether customer refund claims are compliant with the policy. And that may sound to you like, oh, that's super easy, isn't it? That's just Concur and those expense management systems have done that for years. No, it's actually not quite. The policy is very specific, what you should be refunding a passenger for. And you get people claiming for a meal. I'll give you an example. They're claiming a refund for a meal they had, and they happen to be in Seoul in Korea. And we need to check that receipt. We need to check that receipt and understand whether there's an alcoholic drink included in that receipt. How do you do that? You need to translate it first. And then when you get the name of that alcoholic beverage, how do you understand? How do you know? I mean, you're not meant to know all the alcoholic beverages in the world. So the team were gearing up to stand up a team of in excess of 50 people just to be able to handle this manually. And through Gen AI, we managed to provide a solution that is able to interpret those receipts and understand whether they're compliant with the policy or not, and give the contact center a decision and a recommendation. You should pay for this. This is compliant. Oh, hang on a second. Let's go back to the passenger. A Lego set doesn't sound like a compliant expense. Why are they asking for a refund for a Lego set that they bought when they were in Singapore? That doesn't sound like an expense we should be paying for. So really, really important automation. Lots of value to be added by, again, making sure the business is refunding what it should be doing, not lots of additional stuff. The next one quickly, on news agent, we used to have a BPO, a third party, scanning the market, scanning the news on aviation. Really, really important for our executives to understand what's going on. What is the competition doing? Labor relationships, as you know, with airlines is a huge thing. Crisis situations, new routes that airlines are opening, all these kind of things. So we had an agency doing that for us and sending a weekly email to us that it was curated, saying these are the news you should be focusing on. And we used to tell them, hey, can we get a little bit more on this, a little bit more on that? So they would be using, 100 different data sources, news outlets to capture that. We replaced that with an agent. We replaced that with the aviation news agent that is able to, again, go out, collect all those news, and then using Gen AI, summarize and deduplicate, because the same news will be in 20 of those newspapers, 20 of those news outlets. So how do you consolidate into a single but complete, very complete, solutions? And that's what we did with an agent. Again, is it gonna give us huge ROI? Who knows? Who knows what decisions the execs are gonna make on the back of those news? But I can tell you one thing: we did save money by switching off the BPO, number one, and number two, they have the news every morning now as opposed to a weekly. So they're able to react much quickly because the agent is taking care of that. So that's really, really important. And finally, another AI automation. Again, in the group of airlines, maintenance is one of our biggest areas of spend, as you can imagine. So really, really important for us to be able to optimize this as much as we can and apply good old machine learning. And I say good old because this is the classic AI. This is not your Gen AI, but models that can predict when an agent is going to fail based on 1,000 data points of what's happened across the group when you had such and such situations. So by doing that, we're able to react much more quickly and avoid aircrafts on the ground due to maintenance issues. So that's a really, really important automation for us. So again, let me just wrap it up here in terms of the examples, but those are the kinds of things we're working on and we're doing. And again, just highlighting the need for this multi-technology and orchestration and the ability to deploy the best tool for the job to be able to achieve the outcomes.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent, Louise. I see there are some questions. I think Sally's going to help us out.
I am, yeah. Thank you so much, Lewis, for that fantastic presentation. That was brilliant. It was great to see the examples that you gave about how you're using AI in action. I'm going to post our next poll there and I'll get into the questions. So what will matter most for your automation strategy over the next 12 months? We'd love to know. I'll leave that up there for you guys and let's get straight into the questions. So the first question comes through from Tony. And I'll direct this to you, Eric. Tony's asking, are agentic tools like OpenAI's new release replacing RPA?
I think Louise already answered it partly, certainly for how they do it. I don't think so. So I think it's going to enrich. I think it's actually going to allow us to build or to automate more with RPA. But I think what we'll see is, most of our processes are sort of predictive, they're descriptive. This is what you're supposed to do. But then parts of it actually needs a brain or an autonomous agent or someone reaching out an LLM. And that's what means we can orchestrate more and more work. You didn't know automate more and more work, but you just need an orchestrator in order for it all to be put together. I think agents will be able to do a lot more in the future. But right now, if it's deterministic, APIs, RPA, webhooks, and so on, are just a faster, better way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And a question from Homan, and this can go to maybe to you, Lewis. He's asking, what was it that BPM doesn't offer compared to C2's Universal Agentic Orchestration?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me start, and Eric, maybe you can expand a little bit. So the orchestration is this orchestrator is born with automation in mind. So it's very good at managing those SLAs that I mentioned before, tracking that activities are happening in line with the business requirement, as they should, and dealing with the exception. That is, again, very, very important for us. What happens if you're expecting somebody to approve something, or an agent or a bot to do something and it hasn't happened? What is the exception path, etc.? So that is really, really important for us. And it's something that traditional, business process management technologies were falling short on. So that's perhaps that's the most I would say that's the most important thing. Don't know if you want to expand, Eric, on that.
I could have a whole webinar on that. So, I think that the short answer is, BPM's business process management was built for people. So it's sort of human-centric versus orchestration, which is technology-centric. BPM are rules-based, whilst orchestration is event-driven primarily. And because machines loves to be micromanaged and performs better that way, and people don't, we built from the start, we follow each item of work and have an SLA to it. And so we can sort of scale up and scale down the resources that's going to perform the work based on those SLAs to make sure work always gets handled on time. So where a BPM would highlight a bottleneck, C2 would fix it. And with, I guess, BPMs can't fix a person, orchestrators can fix the technology and remedy the problem.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. I'll just end this poll, share the results, and we'll go on to the next question. But it looks like for our audience, the most important thing is demonstrating business value and impact for those automations.
100%.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a webinar on that next time, Louise. Show you how you do it.
Absolutely. Always welcome here at SSON. Now, John's asking, how specifically does, so question for you, Lewis, how specifically does C2 help you connect RPA with AI, agents and humans? How can you do it? How can you do it with BPM or process visualization? So I don't know whether you want to ask that, Eric, or maybe you, Lewis. It's kind of two questions in one. So I suppose the first one is, how specifically does C2 help you connect RPA with AI agents and humans?
And then how you do it with BPM process visualization. Yeah. So I think, so how specifically does it allow you to connect? It is a multi-platform technology, so it allows you to connect natively to, we're using UiPath and we're using Microsoft Power Platform. It talks to those two things natively, so we don't have to make a difference. In fact, it even allows you to have the same process on have workers on each one of those platforms. So again, you can scale quite quickly. So it is really important, and because it can also talk to APIs, etc. We can achieve something really important for us. In a contact-centric environment, for example, we're not allowed. You don't want to put yet another screen in front of your agents that will impact training. Now they have to learn this new thing. It will just make it more inefficient to deal with customer inquiries. You want to make it faster. So there is a rule in our contact center where all they use is Salesforce. That's all they use. That's the user interface for the contact center team. Okay, fantastic. Well, guess what? We can use that, talk to Salesforce, and still ask for a human action to take place by talking to Salesforce. And C2 is not even seen by the contact center. They probably don't even know that's what's orchestrating the job behind the scenes. But we're able to achieve that holistic orchestration through that. So I hope that that answers that question. And the BPM one, I don't know. That's probably more for you, Eric.
I think I touched on it. It's about the speed and the ease of use and how you implement it from the rules based to the event driven, where one, you need to have developers to build it, and if there's a change, you need that. Whilst in C2, it's just a user interface where you put in the different triggers to start the next, or what should trigger the next task, what event triggers it.
Yeah. John's clarified just to say he meant, how can you orchestrate this without visualizing the whole process? So Eric, do you need to visualize the whole process before you can go ahead and orchestrate it or no?
No, well, you don't have to, but luckily with C2 you can. So we have a digital twin of your, well, we're releasing it now, but we have a digital
Exclusive.
twin coming out with all of the, so live view of each task in the process, how it flows, which items go where, how many, the percentages, the SLAs, the value created, any issues. So it's all there ready for the business to see.
Oh, how exciting. Lewis, a question that's come through from Virginia is asking how you have you experienced any failed projects and why?
That's a very good question, and we have. We tried last year. We tried to create our own IAG version of ChatGPT. Don't laugh. I know it sounds silly and funny right now, but we try to do that. We try to create our own, and no, it's going to be better. Only to realize that is that is not what we should be investing. What we should be doing is how can you get Gen AI to do something clever in your business as opposed to try to recreate one. So that was a failed project, but I would qualify the failure by saying we got a lot of learning from that as to what the business is really trying to do and what they need as opposed to building this. The other thing that we have in our world is lots of automations that have a shelf life. They have an expiry date, and we go into those consciously. In the business case, we say, hey, it sounds like your new version of SAP is going to fix this from the core, but you're not rolling that until the second half of 2027. So let me give you an automation that brings the benefit forward, even though we're gonna throw it away later on. And guess what? What happens? What tends to happen is they don't throw it away. They keep it because it's valuable. But yes, we do have things like that as well, where we decommission automations, and so it's not a failure, but it's just a limited duration, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective to take on that automation journey. Anything you wanted to add there, Eric?
No, I think
No.
it's a bit perfect.
Another question that's come through, so just maybe time for a couple more. I don't know if if you don't want to answer this, Lewis, but someone has asked, in terms of RPA optimization, have you been able to decrease your RPA licensing and TCO?
Yes. Yes, and we're not going to take advantage of that until next year. When I say take advantage, meaning a real reduction in cost, because we have annual contracts with RPA vendors. So it doesn't matter how efficient you do it this year, you're not going to get a benefit on the money you already spent with them. That's understood. But what we're doing is we're getting very closer to a renewal on our RPA contract that has a smaller number of licenses, even though we're growing. We're delivering more automations, and that is thanks to the ability to be able to just sweat those assets a little bit more. If you have an automation that only runs at 10 a.m. every Monday, you don't need a full license for that. You can reuse that license to do something else the rest of the day, just like you would do with a person, with a colleague. So yes, that's the answer. The quick answer to that is yes, we are benefiting from that. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then the last question is just come from Mark. So Eric, I'll direct this one to you. Mark's asking, how do you measure and track the SLA of an agentic process when that process is non-deterministic? So it can take many paths to achieve its goal, and how do you audit the decision process?
So in terms of the SLA, so most processes are not agentic completely. So they'll do, go through multiple steps, and some of them are agentic, some are not. So we measure the whole process and each task on its own. Most agentic are really quick. So most are what we call retriever agents or task agents. So they get some information, they query an LLM, manage that data, maybe do one or two steps, but it's really fast. It's not like RPA. So the SLA on those are rarely an issue. And then how do you measure the outcome? So the outcome is, so the agent will be built so it will tell you what it's achieved. So if it's an email coming in, is it a complaint? It will classify it as a complaint, and then the complaint task will be triggered. If it's praise, it's something else. If it's a query for this, if it's an emergency, so it will label it with what it is, and then that will trigger the next step. Was that an answer, Mark?
I think so. Give us a thumbs up, Mark, if you agree with that.
We also store all of the outputs that it's delivering, so you can go back and verify that it's delivered the expected amount, or control it if you're questioned by the customer itself.
Yeah. Brilliant. So sadly, that's all we've got time for. We've reached the top of our time here with today's webinar. A couple of you did ask me if we've recorded this. Yes, we're recording currently, so it will be available on demand for you to watch again, share with your colleagues. You'll get an email in about half an hour with the link. As I said at the beginning, the slides are in the resource center at the bottom, along with some really interesting resources, and along with a link to the speakers, their bios. Please do connect with them on LinkedIn, and I'm sure there are further questions and conversations that you guys can have. And we hope to see you next time at the next SSON webinar. So once again, thank you to Eric and thank you to Lewis for a fantastic presentation, and I will see you next time.
Thank you.